The first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes wasn't the pain. It was the silence. Not the soft kind of silence that means someone nearby is being careful not to wake you. The hollow kind. The kind that means no one came. The ceiling above me was the particular shade of white that hospitals use, flat and indifferent. The kind of white that doesn't reflect anything back. I blinked at it for a long moment before I understood that I was alive. That the machines beside me were beeping steadily like a metronome keeping time for a song nobody was playing, and that the chair beside my bed, the one visitors are supposed to sit in, was empty. There was a single paper cup of water on the tray table. No flowers, no jacket draped over the arm of the chair, no phone charger snaked from the outlet to the bed where someone had been using it through the night. Just the cup, the machines, and the white ceiling doing nothing. A nurse came in a few minutes later. Young, efficient, a lanyard with too many badges on it swinging when she walked. She saw my eyes open, and her face shifted into the practiced warmth that medical people learn to wear like a second skin. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Priya. You're at Northwestern Memorial. You came in Tuesday night." I tried to speak. My throat felt like I'd swallowed sand. "Tuesday," I repeated. The word tasted strange. "It's Thursday morning," she said, checking something on my chart. "You had emergency surgery Wednesday afternoon. Ruptured appendix." "It was close, Maya. You're lucky you came in when you did. Lucky." I filed that word away for later. "My family," I said. It wasn't really a question. More like an instinct. The way you reach for your phone when something happens before you even decide to reach for it. Priya's face did something careful. The practiced warmth held, but something behind her eyes adjusted. "They were contacted," she said. I noticed what she didn't say. She didn't say they came. She didn't say they're downstairs getting coffee or parking the car or on their way. She said they were contacted, which is the medical way of saying, "We did our part." "How long?" I asked. She looked at her chart. Not because the answer was in it. I could tell. She looked at it because it gave her somewhere to put her eyes that wasn't my face. "Your mother called in," she said. She spoke with the attending. "In person," I said. "How long were they here in person?" Priya set the chart down. She looked at me directly, which I understood was a choice she was making. "They weren't able to come in," she said. "They're traveling." The word traveling landed differently than it should have. I'd known it was coming. Somewhere under the anesthesia fog, I'd known it the whole time. But knowing something and hearing it said out loud in a hospital room where you woke up alone are two different things. "Italy?" I said. Priya nodded once. "Small and careful." "My brother's wedding," I said. She nodded again. I turned my face toward the window. Chicago in October looked gray and honest from the 4th floor. Clouds the color of old concrete. A tree losing its leaves in the courtyard below. Unhurried, unimpressed with anything happening in this room. My brother Tyler was getting married in Tuscany. The wedding had been planned for 8 months. The venue deposit alone had been $12,000, which I knew because my mother had called me twice in 1 week, asking me to wire my contribution before the cancellation deadline. I'd sent it. I always sent it. That's what I did. "My name is Maya. I'm 31 years old. I'm a floor nurse at a pediatric clinic in Wicker Park, which sounds gentler than it is. I work with sick children and their exhausted parents, and I spend my shifts being the calmest person in the room because someone has to be. I grew up being the calmest person in my house too, but that was a different kind of work. Less chosen. My brother Tyler is 26. He has never held a job for longer than a year. Not because he lacks intelligence. Tyler is funny, magnetic. The kind of person who walks into a room and rearranges it around himself without trying. My mother has been arranging her life around him for as long as I can remember. My father too, before he left. Tyler doesn't arrange anything around anyone. He moves through the world like weather. Beautiful, unpredictable, and not responsible for the damage. The wedding in Italy was to a woman named Sabine whose family had money, real money, the kind with a house in Umbria and a second house in Nice. My mother had been talking about it since the engagement, like she'd personally achieved something. She used the phrase, "our family's future," with a frequency that made my jaw hurt. Our family's future cost me, the last time I added it up, somewhere around $73,000 over 6 years. I don't mean that loosely. I mean I have a spreadsheet. Rent assistance when Tyler moved to New York. moving expenses when he moved back, my mother's car loan, the down payment gap on her condo, medical bills my parents couldn't cover, Tyler's DUI lawyer fees, which my mother called an emergency, and which Tyler called a misunderstanding, and which I called $11,000 I didn't get back, and the smaller things, the bridesmaid dress I paid for Tyler's first almost engagement, the birthday trips, the deposits, the just until the first of the month transfers that never came back around. I don't keep the spreadsheet to feel sorry for myself. I keep it so I don't gaslight myself. Because gaslighting yourself is easy when the people doing the taking are people you love. They tell you the taking is family. They tell you it's temporary. They remind you of things you don't remember them doing for you, and they say it with such confidence that you start to wonder if your memory is the problem. You become the girl who double-checks her own receipts because she no longer trusts her own accounting. I was that girl for 6 years. Then my appendix ruptured on a Tuesday night when I was on my couch eating leftover soup and watching something I won't even remember. And my body finally said, enough. One way or another, I spent Wednesday in surgery. I woke up Thursday morning to an empty chair and a paper cup of water, and Priya's careful, professional face. The pain came fully online around noon. Deep and specific in my lower abdomen, the kind of pain that makes you understand exactly which part of your body went wrong. Priya managed it with something that softened the edges without erasing them, and I lay in the adjusted bed half watching the window and thinking about nothing in a deliberate way. My phone had been placed in the drawer of the bedside table. When Priya left, I opened the drawer and looked at it for a while, without touching it. Then I picked it. 14 missed calls. 6 from my mother, spread across Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. 2 from Tyler, which surprised me. 4 from a number I didn't recognize, local area code. Several texts, mostly my mother. The subject lines visible in the notification preview. Call me when you can. What are the doctors saying? Your Aunt Sharon says you should ask about. Tyler says to tell you he's thinking of you. Tyler's message was a separate text. It said, heard you're in the hospital. Hope you feel better soon. The ceremony was beautiful. There was a photo attached. Him and Sabine at an altar in a stone chapel, autumn light coming through old windows, her dress trailing on flagstone floors. He looked happy. Genuinely. The kind of happy that doesn't leave room to wonder about the people it left behind. I set the phone back in the drawer without responding. Priya came back to check my vitals at 2. She seemed to be the nurse assigned to me. I asked her, while she was adjusting my IV line, whether anyone had come to the room since Tuesday. She paused. Just slightly. There was someone, she said. I watched her face. My mother? No. She finished with the IV. Someone came to the nursing station Wednesday evening while you were still in post-op. He asked about your room. We couldn't give him specific information, but he sat in the waiting area for a while. And then last night, he was back. He sat in the hall outside your room for most of the night. I felt something strange move through me. Who? He said his name was Daniel Voss. She hesitated. He said he was your uncle. The name hit me somewhere behind my sternum. Daniel Voss. My mother's older brother. The one she had not spoken to in 11 years. The one whose name, when it came up, which was rarely, which was always by accident, made her mouth go flat and her eyes go somewhere private that she never invited anyone else into. I'd asked about him exactly twice in my life. The first time she said it was complicated. The second time she said some relationships aren't worth maintaining, Maya, and you'll understand that when you're older. I never understood it. She never explained it. He was simply gone, the way certain rooms in a house can be locked without you ever being given a reason. He left a note, Priya said, and held out a folded piece of paper. Small, the kind torn from a pocket notebook. I unfolded it with one hand. His handwriting was neat and even, the handwriting of someone who was taught by nuns or by discipline or both. I know you don't know me well. I know this isn't how I would have wanted to reach you. I'm not asking for anything. I just didn't want you to be here alone. Daniel. I read it twice. Then I folded it back along its creases and held it. How long was he here last night? I asked. Priya's expression softened past professional. Until around 4 in the morning, she said. He brought coffee for the night staff. That night, after the dinner tray came and went, and the light outside the window went from gray to dark, I heard footsteps in the hall that slowed at my door. I turned my head. He was tall, somewhere in his late 50s or early 60s, I thought. Though he had the kind of face that had been weathered rather than aged, sharp at the jaw, careful at the eyes. He wore a dark jacket and carried nothing. He stopped at the window in my door and looked in without entering. And when he saw that I was awake and looking back at him, he went still. I lifted my hand. A small gesture. "Come in." He pushed the door open quietly and stood just inside it, close enough to be in the room but not close enough to crowd it. "You don't have to stand all the way over there," I said. He moved to the chair beside my bed and sat. He kept his hands on his knees like someone who'd been taught not to fidget. For a moment, neither of us spoke. And it was the kind of silence that isn't uncomfortable so much as large. The kind that holds things. "How did you know I was here?" I asked. "You put me as your secondary emergency contact," he said. "A few years ago. The hospital called my number when they couldn't reach anyone who would come." I stared at him. I had a dim memory of it. An online patient portal, 3 years ago, filling in a secondary contact field because the form required one, and not knowing who to put. His name had surfaced from somewhere in my memory, a business card my mother had once discarded and I'd kept without knowing why. I hadn't thought about it since. It had been a reflex, the way you sometimes choose things before you understand why you're choosing them. "She couldn't have reached anyone who would come," I said slowly. "My mother is in Italy." He nodded. He didn't say anything else about that. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "I drove down Wednesday evening," he said. "I live in Milwaukee. It's not far." "You sat in the hall." "You were in post-op," he said simply. "I didn't know if you'd want me here." "I wasn't going to walk into your room without knowing that." I looked at him. At the steadiness of him, the way he sat in the chair, like he had nowhere else to be and no performance to give about it. "Why?" I asked. He thought about it, the way someone thinks before they answer when they're not going to deflect. "Because you're family," he said. "Whatever your mother decided about me, you didn't make that decision. You were 15 when she cut contact. You didn't get a vote." Something moved in my chest. Behind the surgical ache, lower and older. "She never told me why," I said. He looked at his hands. "I know. Is there a why?" He was quiet for a moment. "There is. It's not a short story, and I don't think tonight is the right time for it." He looked up. "But I'll tell you anything you want to know. You deserve that." I turned toward the window. The city outside was doing its usual indifferent glittering, all those lights that don't belong to anyone in particular. "The billing office told me something," I said. "They said a payment came through. Anonymous." Daniel said nothing. "That was you," I said. Still nothing, which was its own answer. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "I know," he said. I didn't argue with him. I didn't have enough energy left for the kind of argument that looks like gratitude. I let it sit where it was. He stayed until midnight. He didn't fill the silence with noise. He brought a book from somewhere, a worn paperback, the kind that's been read multiple times and read quietly in the chair while I drifted in and out of a shallow half-sleep that felt, for the first time in a long time, like I wasn't completely alone in it. My mother called the next morning at 7:45. I watched the phone ring from the bedside table. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to the voicemail, which was 4 minutes long and covered, in this order, how worried she had been, how Tyler's wedding had been the most important event in the family's recent history, how she had done everything she could from overseas, how I had always had a tendency to make things more dramatic than they were, and how she expected me to be reasonable when they returned on Sunday. She did not ask how I felt. She did not ask what the doctors had said. She did not ask, at any point in 4 minutes, whether I had been alone. I set the phone down and lay looking at the ceiling for a long time. When Priya came in at 8, I asked her what I needed to do to update my emergency contact information. She said she'd bring me the form. I spent that day doing the quiet work of a person who has finally reached a conclusion they'd been avoiding. I called my bank. I had a joint account with my mother that she'd set up years ago for family emergencies, which meant an account she had access to when something needed to be transferred quickly. I removed her access. It took longer than it should have. There were forms and a phone call and a hold time that played music I hated. But I stayed on the line. I called my landlord and updated my lease emergency contact. I went into my phone and changed the auto transfer I'd set up 3 years ago, the one that sent $400 to my mother's account on the first of every month for what she called general household expenses and what I had stopped asking about. I didn't delete her number. I wasn't at the place yet where I could make that particular clean cut. But I could cut the money. Money is the clearest language in a family that speaks primarily in money. Daniel came back that evening with takeout from a Thai place nearby, containers stacked carefully in a bag, and the nurse at the station had apparently already learned who he was because she waved him through without stopping him. He set the containers on the tray table, and we ate together without saying much, which felt both strange and completely natural, the way things feel when they're right, in a way you hadn't expected. "Tell me about the why," I said. Somewhere in the middle of the pad thai, he set his fork down. He'd known it was coming. I could tell from the small adjustment in his posture. "Your mother and I had a falling out over your grandfather's estate," he said. "When he died, he left the house to both of us jointly. I wanted to sell it and split the proceeds. She wanted to keep it in the family, which meant she wanted to keep it and buy me out for less than market value." He paused. "When I wouldn't agree to that, she told your stepfather I'd tried to cheat her. She told a version of the story to everyone who would listen. By the time she was done, I was the villain, and she was the wronged party, and I'd lost most of my relationship with her side of the family." He said it evenly, without heat, like something that had been too painful for too long and had finally passed into plain fact. "She's good at that," I said, telling versions. He looked at me. "Yes. She told me a version of my father leaving that took me years to see around," I said. "I think she tells herself the version too. I think eventually she can't tell the difference." Daniel nodded slowly. "I used to be angry about it. Now I mostly just think it's sad." "I'm a little angry," I said. "You're entitled to be." I looked at the Thai food getting cold on the tray table. "She called yesterday." 4-minute voicemail. She managed to fit in more excuses than I thought was physically possible. "She'll call again when they land Sunday," he said. Not a prediction. A statement. "I know," I said. "I'm not going to be her emergency fund anymore." He didn't say good for you. He didn't cheer me on the way people do sometimes when they're more interested in the drama than the person. He just looked at me with the kind of steadiness that means, "I see what you're doing and it's real and you don't need my applause. It's going to be harder than it sounds," he said. "Not because of them, because of you. You've been doing it so long it's going to feel like something's missing for a while." "I know," I said. "It gets clearer," he said. "Eventually it gets clearer." I believed him. I didn't know why, except that he said it the way people say things that are true, without decoration. My mother arrived Sunday. I knew she was coming. She'd texted the night before. "Landing at 2, will come straight to you from the airport," which meant she'd be arriving with luggage and jet lag, and the particular energy she had when she'd had to travel to be inconvenienced. The energy of someone who wanted you to understand the cost of being there. Daniel was in the chair when she walked in. She stopped in the doorway the way you stop when you walk into a room and find something in it you didn't prepare for. Her eyes went from me to him and back again, and for 3 full seconds her face did something I'd never seen it do before. It went blank. Not the blank of surprise exactly. More like the blank of something that's been waiting to be forced out of hiding and finally has been. "What is he doing here?" she said. Not a question, a flat statement dressed as one. "Visiting me," I said. Her eyes came to mine, sharp and reassessing. "Maya, you can come in," I said. "You don't have to stand there." She came in. She set her carry-on by the door and stood at the foot of my bed, and I could see her deciding in real time how to play it, the way I'd watched her make that calculation my whole life. How angry can I afford to be? "What's the room? What's the exit?" "You look better than I expected," she said, looking at me. "Thanks," I said. "I almost died, but I look great." Her mouth tightened. "Maya, don't. I had emergency surgery on Wednesday," I said. "You were on a vineyard somewhere." "I was at my son's wedding," she said, and the word son landed with a weight she'd intended. "The beloved one, the one who warranted it." "I know where you were," I said. "I know what you chose. We were in another country. There was nothing we could. There were flights. I said. My voice came out quieter than I'd expected. Not shaking, just flat and clear, the way I'd learned to make it in exam rooms when parents needed to hear something they didn't want to. There are always flights. You made a choice. I'm not going to argue with you about whether it was the right one. I just want you to know that I understand it. She looked at Daniel. The look was its own kind of language, loaded, warning. You need to leave. Daniel didn't move. He looked at me. He can stay, I said. My mother's jaw set. He has nothing to do with this family. He was here, I said. For 5 days he was here. He drove down from Milwaukee and he sat outside my room and he didn't ask for anything. I paused. That makes him more family than a lot of people. Don't be dramatic, she said. But her voice had changed slightly. Something in it had gone defensive in a new way. I'm not being dramatic, I said. I'm being accurate. That's different. I know you have trouble with the difference. Her eyes flashed. I have always done everything for you. Everything. When your father left, I held this family together. When you were in college, You co-signed one loan, I said, which I paid back. With interest. I kept my voice even. Mom, I have a spreadsheet. I've kept it for 6 years. I know exactly what's flowed in which direction in this family. Do you want me to go through it? She went still. $73,000, I said. Give or take. I stopped counting the small ones after a while because the small ones were endless. I looked at her. Tyler's lawyer fees alone were $11,000. You called that an emergency. I wonder what you'd call this. Her voice went quiet, the dangerous quiet. You're upset. You've been through something hard. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking the clearest I've thought in years, I said. Surgery will do that. Waking up alone will do that. You weren't alone. You had the... I woke up in an empty room, I said. The chair was empty. There was a paper cup of water. That's what you provided. A paper cup of water that the hospital put there. She looked away, toward the window. I watched her profile and I thought about how much of my life I'd spent reading her face, trying to predict which version of her was coming so I could calibrate accordingly. I was tired of calibrating. I closed the joint account, I said. The auto transfer is canceled. The access you had to my secondary savings is removed. She turned back to me. Her face had gone to the color of old wax. You can't. I already did, I said. While I was in this bed, I had a lot of time and my phone and a lot of clarity. I kept my voice level. I love you. I think I'll always love you in some complicated way that doesn't go away just because it should. But I'm done being the account you draw from when things get expensive. I'm done. Tyler needs. Tyler is 26 years old, I said. He just married into money. Tyler is going to be fine. Her voice went shrill. This is his influence. She flung a look at Daniel. You've been filling her head with... He told me about the estate, I said. That's the only thing he's told me. And he didn't even bring it up. I asked. She turned to Daniel. For a moment I saw something naked in her face. Fear. Not the shallow kind. The deep kind. The kind that comes from knowing exactly what you did and knowing that the person in front of you now knows it too. You have no right to be here, she said. Her voice was lower now. You have no right to her. Daniel looked at her calmly. I'm not claiming anything, he said. I'm just here. You walked away from this family. You removed me from this family, he said, still quiet. There's a difference. And you know it. The silence that followed was the particular silence of a truth that's been said in a room and can't be unsaid. My mother's face worked through several expressions and landed on none of them cleanly. She turned back to me, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something under the performance. Something that might have been regret, or might have been grief. It passed quickly. I hope you know what you're doing, she said. It came out smaller than she intended. I'm figuring it out, I said. That's new, too. She picked up her carry-on. She moved toward the door. She paused with her hand on the frame, her back to me, and I thought she was going to say something else. Something real. The way people sometimes do at exits, when it's the last chance and they know it. She didn't. She walked out. The sound of her heels faded down the corridor and then was gone, and the room settled back into itself. The machines beeped. The window showed the same gray October sky it had shown all week. Daniel sat in the chair with his hands on his knees and said nothing, which was exactly right. I exhaled. The kind of exhale that has been held for longer than one conversation. I'm going to throw up, I said. Bathroom's on your left, he said. I laughed. It surprised me, the laugh. It came up from somewhere below the surgical ache, and it was short and unpretty and completely genuine. Daniel smiled, and it was the first time I'd seen him smile. And it was the kind of smile that belongs to someone who has been through enough hard things to find dark humor genuinely funny. I didn't throw up. I sat in the hospital bed and felt the particular lightness of a thing that has been set down. That night, the last night before my discharge, Priya came in to check my vitals one final time. She glanced at Daniel in the chair, at the takeout containers on the tray, at the comfortable quiet that had settled between us like something earned. You're doing better, she said. Not about my blood pressure. I know, I said. She adjusted my blanket with the gentle efficiency she'd had all week. Discharge paperwork tomorrow morning. Who's taking you home? I looked at Daniel. He raised an eyebrow. A question. He is? I said. 3 weeks after discharge, I met Daniel for coffee at a place in Lincoln Square that he'd looked up specifically because it was near my apartment. We'd had coffee twice before that and talked for hours both times. In the unrushed way of two people who have a lot of years to catch up on and are in no particular hurry to rush it. He told me about my grandfather, about the years before I was old enough to remember clearly. When the family had been different, before the versions started, before the stories calcified into the shape my mother needed them to take. He told me about a younger version of my mother who he'd actually liked, who had been funny and sharp and scared, and who had made fear into armor so gradually that eventually she couldn't tell the difference. I told him about the spreadsheet. He didn't flinch. You kept it so you wouldn't lie to yourself, he said. Yes, I said. Smart, he said. The calls from my mother had slowed to 2 a week, then 1. Tyler had texted twice, both times to ask about money. Once for a security deposit on an apartment in Milan, where he and Sabine were apparently going to spend part of the year. Once for help with what he called a temporary cash flow issue that was actually a credit card he'd maxed. I hadn't responded to either. I'd read them both and put my phone face down and felt the guilt arrive and pass through me like weather, like the kind that doesn't last. Guilt is trained. Daniel had told me that. It's not a moral instinct in those cases. It's a conditioned response that took years to install. It takes time to uninstall. You don't do it by arguing with the feeling. You just let it come and you don't act on it, and eventually it loses confidence in you. I was learning. On a Saturday in November, cold and clear, I walked to the lake. Chicago in November is not beautiful in the way that photographs are beautiful. It's beautiful in the way that honesty is beautiful, blunt and bright, and without apology. The water was a hard gray blue, and the wind came off it directly. The kind that gets through your jacket regardless. And I stood at the edge of it with my hands in my pockets and thought about nothing particular with great intention. My phone buzzed. I looked at it. My mother. I stood there and let it ring. Then I put it back in my pocket. Behind me, the city went on being a city. In front of me, the lake went on being a lake. And I stood at the edge of both and breathed in the cold air that didn't belong to anyone and felt, for the first time in a long time, something that might have been mine. There's something they don't tell you about families like mine, which are not rare, which are, in fact, extremely ordinary in their particular shape of harm. They don't tell you that the hardest part isn't cutting the money. It's cutting the belief that if you give enough, eventually the love you were promised will arrive. The belief that your worth is something you can earn through sacrifice if you just sacrifice enough. I'd spent 6 years funding the operating budget of a family that treated me like a line item. I'd almost died for it. Literally, medically, almost died, because I'd been working extra shifts to cover a deficit that was never going to close, and my body had been trying to tell me for months what I refused to hear. I heard it now. Daniel texted at noon. Coffee tomorrow? I typed back. Yes. I'll actually drink mine this time. He sent back a thumbs up and nothing else. Which was, I was learning. Very much his way. I stayed by the lake a while longer. I thought about the hospital room, The empty chair, the paper cup, the machines keeping in different time. I thought about a man driving down from Milwaukee on a Wednesday night because his niece's name had come up on a hospital call and he couldn't let her be alone, even when she didn't know she needed him, even when he didn't know if he was wanted. I thought about what family actually means when you strip away the obligation and the debt and the versions people tell to stay comfortable. What it means in the clearest, most literal sense. It means someone who shows up, not who shows up when it's convenient, or when there's something to gain, or when a wedding in Italy can't be rescheduled. Someone who gets in a car on a night when no one asked them to, and drives through the dark towards someone who's hurting and sits outside a glass door for hours without asking for credit, without making it about themselves, without presenting you with a bill for the inconvenience. I had spent 31 years looking for that in the wrong rooms. It had been in Milwaukee the whole time, patient, waiting for me to update my emergency contact information by accident. I walked back through the cold toward my apartment. The leaves were mostly gone from the trees on my block. Everything was pared down to its actual shape, the way late autumn does no softness to hide behind. Just the clean lines of what things actually are. I thought that was probably enough of a metaphor for one afternoon. I thought I'd had enough of metaphors for a while, and what I wanted now was just the clear, plain thing. Coffee tomorrow. A story I was still learning, and the quiet, good company of someone who brought takeout and didn't fill silence with noise. That was enough. That was, after everything, entirely enough.